The message came on a quiet night. Most people on Earth didn't even know it happened at first. The stars looked peaceful, and the world below kept turning like always. But far above, in the blackness beyond Mars, something had arrived. A signal that wasn't human. It carried a tone so sharp, so cold, that even machines hesitated before translating it. It said, "To the species known as humanity, you have crossed into forbidden space. You will surrender your fleets, your colonies, and your technology. You have one cycle to comply." At first it sounded unreal. Some thought it was a prank, another cosmic hoax. But the experts knew. The signal's origin was deep in the outer rim, from a power no one had ever seen up close but everyone had heard about. The Galactic Empire of Zorath. For centuries, their rule had stretched across thousands of worlds. They had crushed every uprising, silenced every rival, and erased whole civilizations that refused to kneel. No one dared to challenge them. Until now, they had ignored Earth. Humanity was small, young, and distant, just one more developing race in a galaxy full of giants. But something had changed. Terran explorers, searching far beyond known space, had stumbled upon a derelict station floating near the galactic edge. They brought back fragments of ancient technology, strange power cores that pulsed with energy even after eons of silence. The moment those artifacts were activated, the Empire noticed. The ultimatum spread like wildfire through the networks. On every colony, people gathered around screens, listening to that cold metallic voice demanding surrender. Fear rippled through millions of hearts. Parents held their children tighter. Soldiers checked their weapons with silent faces. Everyone remembered Earth's old wars, the long struggles, the endless rebuilding. Humanity had finally found peace, and now the universe wanted to take it away. But on Earth's orbital defense station, the reaction was not what anyone expected. In the command chamber, filled with the quiet hum of machinery and the soft glow of holographic maps, the senior officers didn't panic. They simply stared at the transmission, then at each other. A long silence filled the room before one of them spoke. "So, they finally noticed us." The others exchanged faint smiles, not the kind that mocked danger, but the kind that came from recognition, as if they had been expecting this day. Across the solar system, preparations began quietly. Old orbital docks that had been dormant for decades lit up again. On Mars, the red dust trembled as ancient hangars opened, revealing ships once thought to be relics. Massive carriers that had defended Earth during the last Great War were powered up once more. Their engines roared after 100 years of silence. People on Earth watched in awe as the skies filled with trails of light, the Terran Armada awakening. The media couldn't explain it. How had these ships survived, hidden in plain sight? Who had maintained them all this time? No one knew the full truth. But rumors whispered that humanity had never stopped preparing, even during peace, even while exploring the stars. There were always those who remembered the warnings of history, that peace was fragile, and freedom demanded vigilance. Deep in the lunar command base, messages poured in from across the colonies. Captains confirmed readiness. Engineers reported ship counts. Every sector of the Armada responded with precision, as if the entire fleet had been waiting for this exact call. And in a way, it had. The Empire's fleets were already moving. Long, spear-shaped warships of dark metal cut through hyperspace, their hulls glowing with energy. They were coming not just to fight, but to make an example. They wanted to remind the galaxy that the Zorathian Empire still ruled through fear. Their emperor believed this would be an easy lesson to teach. He didn't understand humans. When the Empire's vanguard entered the edge of the Sol system, they expected to find chaos, ships fleeing, civilians screaming, and governments begging for mercy. Instead, they found silence. The outer defense grid was active, every sensor and cannon online. Automated drones tracked their every movement. There were no panic signals, no surrender codes, just quiet, watchful patience. On board the lead Zorathian ship, the commander frowned at the readings. "Their system is fortified," his second officer muttered. More than the report suggested. The commander's voice was dry and confident. "Primitive fortifications. They will fall." He was wrong. From the dark side of Mars, the first Terran formation appeared. Not hundreds, but thousands of ships. Some were sleek and silver, fresh from the latest colonies. Others were ancient, their armor marked by old battles, patched and scarred but still strong. And at their center floated a colossal ship, black and silent, its hull engraved with the name Invictus. The Zorathian commander stared at it through the visual feed, narrowing his eyes. "That ship is not in our records," a voice responded across open channels, calm and steady. "You won't find it in your records," it said, "because we built it to be forgotten." Every Terran captain heard those words, and something shifted inside them. The fear that had lingered vanished. In its place came focus, and the kind that humans had carried since their earliest days. They didn't see themselves as heroes or conquerors. They were survivors. They always had been. The Empire repeated its ultimatum, demanding surrender. No human ship replied. Instead, the Terran Armada's formation tightened. Shields rose. Engines flared. From Earth to Neptune, thousands of civilians watched live feeds, holding their breath. And that was when the strangest thing happened. Someone laughed. A soft, human laugh crackled through the transmission lines, a brief, unshaken, real. It came from one of the smaller frigates, its crew staring at the overwhelming enemy fleet and somehow finding the courage to smile. That laugh spread like a spark. Across dozens of ships, tension eased. Faces softened. People smiled, not out of arrogance, but because deep down they understood what was about to happen. Humanity had faced extinction before, in wars, plagues, disasters, and endless challenges. They had always been told they couldn't survive, and every time they had proved the universe wrong. Now, staring at an empire that called itself unstoppable, they were ready to do it again. As the Zorathian ships advanced, Earth's defense grid powered up in full. A deep hum rolled across the atmosphere as energy fields locked into place. Massive cannons on the moon turned toward the stars. On the outer rim of the system, hidden stations came alive, each one connected to a secret protocol known only by one name: Project Aegis. The Empire had numbers. They had technology that had conquered thousands of worlds. But what they didn't have was understanding of what drove humans, of what gave them strength. To the galaxy, humanity was unpredictable. To themselves, they were simply doing what they had always done, facing the impossible and refusing to bow. As the fleets aligned, the signal from Earth went silent. There were no speeches, no final warnings. Just one transmission sent to all human ships: hold the line. No fear. Every pilot, every engineer, every officer repeated it like a heartbeat. Hold the line. No fear. The Empire saw it as madness. The rest of the galaxy watched in disbelief. But those who knew humanity, the traders, the explorers, the settlers who had seen what the species could endure, felt something stirring inside. They knew that smile. They had seen it before, in the eyes of miners facing collapsing tunnels, in the soldiers defending hopeless outposts, in scientists defying extinction-level storms. It wasn't arrogance. It was memory. The memory of every fight, every hardship, every victory won by will alone. And so, as the first shots flared across the blackness of space, humanity didn't tremble. They smiled, because in that moment they weren't just defending Earth. They were reminding the galaxy who they really were. A race that had learned to stand tall, not because they were the strongest, but because they had already survived everything else. Far below, on the blue planet that started it all, children watched the skies. Old veterans stood on balconies, silent, eyes glistening with pride. They didn't know how this battle would end, but they knew one thing for sure. The human spirit had never been stronger, and somewhere aboard the Invictus, a single voice whispered into the comms, calm and steady, just before the first Terran volley was fired: "Let them come." The transmission ended there. What followed next would shake the galaxy. The battle that everyone feared never started the way the Empire expected. They thought humans would rush in blindly, screaming and firing everything they had. That was the image most civilizations had of humanity. Wild, unpredictable, emotional. But what the Empire met that day was something else entirely. The Terran Armada moved with quiet precision. There was no panic, no chaos, no wasted motion. Every ship had its place, every pilot knew their role. It was as if the entire fleet breathed as one. The Zorathian commander couldn't understand it. His scouts had reported that humans were divided among dozens of governments and colonies, always arguing about politics, always disagreeing. But the data he saw now didn't fit that picture. The humans were united. Their signals were encrypted beyond anything the Empire had seen before. Their fleet formations shifted like living patterns, adapting faster than any simulation could predict. For the first hour, there was silence between both sides. The Empire's main ships held position, waiting for Earth's surrender message, but no message came. Instead, the humans started broadcasting an open channel feed across the galaxy. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a call to arms. It was a live view of Earth, oceans, cities, forests, and skies. Children playing, families standing together, ordinary people watching the heavens. The feed carried no words, only images, but its meaning was clear. We are still here. The galaxy saw that, and something shifted. In distant systems, people who had lived under the Empire's rule for centuries paused to watch. For the first time, they saw a species that didn't tremble when the Empire roared. They saw courage wrapped in simplicity, not military pride, but the quiet bravery of people protecting their home. The Empire tried to jam the broadcast, but it kept reappearing. Every time they blocked one signal, another came online from a different Terran ship or colony. It was as if the entire human network had prepared for this moment long ago. And in truth they had. For years, Earth scientists had been building a hidden system of communication relays, small enough to hide in asteroid belts and planetary rings. Now that system turned into a weapon of unity. On board the lead Imperial ship, frustration grew. The commander gave the order to advance. The first wave of their warships crossed the boundary near Saturn's orbit, glowing with the faint blue light of their energy shields. The Empire had fought thousands of wars and they had never lost a first strike. This was supposed to be a demonstration, crush one small planet, and the rest of the galaxy would stay quiet. But when the Empire's scanners swept the Terran Armada, something unexpected appeared. Dozens of human ships were powered down, cold, dark, almost invisible against the stars. At first, the Empire thought those were decoys or abandoned craft. They ignored them and focused on the active warships. That was their first mistake. Those dead ships weren't dead at all. They were part of Project Aegis, vessels equipped with energy-masking technology that could hide even from quantum radar. The moment the Empire's formation crossed the defensive line, the hidden Terran ships powered up simultaneously. Thousands of energy signatures flared to life, surrounding the invaders in a perfect trap. The sky filled with light, and the first shots of the war were fired. The initial blast wasn't chaotic. It was planned to the second. Human ships didn't aim for the enemy's engines or weapons. They went straight for the Empire's command relays. Every Zarathian ship depended on a central coordination grid, and within minutes that grid began to collapse. The Empire's perfectly trained soldiers suddenly found themselves blind. Their communications flickered and failed. The smooth rhythm of their machines turned into confusion. Across the galaxy, watchers gasped. No one had ever seen the Empire lose control before. The humans pressed forward not with arrogance, but with sharp, steady focus. Their ships moved like shadows, flanking and striking in synchronized waves. Every time an Imperial ship tried to regroup, it was met by a swarm of Terran fighters emerging from hidden launch bays. The Empire's advantage in size meant nothing when the enemy moved faster and thought quicker. Inside the Invictus, the command crew worked in silence, their hands moving across glowing controls. There was no cheering, no shouting, just calm voices confirming positions, issuing short commands. The captain's eyes stayed fixed on the battle display, watching the red markers of the Empire's fleet flicker and vanish one by one. But even in victory, the humans didn't feel triumph. They knew this was only the beginning. The Empire was vast, and this was just one of their many fleets. So the orders from Earth were clear. Defend, don't destroy. Humanity wasn't here to conquer. They wanted the galaxy to see their strength, not their rage. When the first Imperial ship exploded, its debris drifted slowly across the black. The humans didn't fire on the escape pods. They let them go. That act of mercy spread faster than the battle footage itself. Across the stars, old colonies whispered to each other. Maybe the stories about humans were true. Maybe they really were different. The Empire's commander realized too late that he was trapped. His sensors showed Terran ships closing in from all directions. He tried to send a distress call, but his long-range transmitter was jammed by the same network that had broadcast Earth's image earlier. With his pride bleeding into panic, he gave the final order: retreat. As the Empire's fleet turned to flee, the humans didn't chase. They simply watched. Their ships held position in a protective ring around the solar system. The captain of the Invictus ordered a ceasefire. Slowly the light of battle faded. The stars returned to silence, but the galaxy was no longer the same. News of the Empire's defeat reached every world within hours. For some it felt impossible. For others it felt like justice. On planets where people had been forced to kneel for generations, celebrations broke out. Songs were sung in languages long forbidden. The image of a small blue world standing against the most powerful empire became a symbol, not of war but of hope. In the Empire's capital, the news struck like lightning. The Emperor's advisors argued, unable to explain how a young species could have achieved such coordination. Their military analysts insisted it must have been luck. But deep inside they knew, this was not luck. This was the one thing the Empire could never manufacture. Unity born from hardship. Humans didn't fight because they wanted power. They fought because they couldn't accept losing their home. While the Empire struggled to rebuild its pride, the Terran Armada didn't rest. They used the time to repair their ships and strengthen their defenses. Crews worked side by side. Scientists, soldiers, miners, farmers, everyone contributed. There was no sense of glory, only purpose. They weren't preparing to invade anyone. They were preparing for survival. Across human colonies, people who had once felt distant from Earth now felt connected again. A farmer on Titan shared the same hope as a pilot orbiting Neptune. They knew the Empire would return, and when it did, they would be ready together. Meanwhile, the rest of the galaxy was changing. Some worlds secretly reached out to Earth, sending encrypted messages offering friendship. Others simply sent thanks. For the first time in centuries, smaller civilizations dared to dream of freedom. The Empire's shadow still hung over them, but it no longer seemed unbreakable. Back on Earth, there was no parade, no grand announcement. Life continued as always, in schools, families, cities glowing under the same sun. But everyone knew deep down that history had shifted. Humanity had shown its true nature to the stars, not through dominance, but through defiance wrapped in calm. In quiet corners of the planet, old veterans of past wars sat watching the news, remembering when the idea of fighting the galaxy would have sounded ridiculous. Now it was reality, yet they weren't afraid. They had seen enough to understand. The secret to humanity's strength was never technology or numbers. It was something invisible, the unshakable will to protect what they loved. And so, as the Empire licked its wounds and plotted revenge, the humans continued to build. Their engineers worked on new ships, stronger shields, better communications. Scientists studied the wreckage of Imperial vessels, learning everything they could. Every discovery was shared freely among human colonies. No secrets, no rivalries. The universe had forced them to unite, and now nothing could divide them. Somewhere in deep space, a single Terran probe recorded the retreat of the last Imperial cruiser. Its sensors captured a haunting image, a massive ship burning as it drifted away, its lights flickering like dying stars. That image was later transmitted to every human colony, accompanied by a simple message: "We are not prey." The galaxy received the message loud and clear. The myth of human weakness had been shattered. Empires built on fear began to tremble. And far beyond the stars, civilizations that had never dared to speak against their masters whispered one name with awe: Earth. Humanity hadn't just defended itself. It had awakened the galaxy. But deep in the darkness, where the Empire gathered its wounded pride, something stirred. Their defeat had not humbled them, it had enraged them. And they would return stronger, vowing to crush the smiling species that dared to resist. For now, though, the galaxy was quiet. The humans had earned a moment of peace, but everyone knew it wouldn't last. Still, even in that silence, one truth echoed across the stars. You can threaten humans. You can outnumber them. You can even outgun them. For a few short months after the first battle, the galaxy was quiet. The wreckage of the Empire's fleet drifted beyond Saturn's orbit, glowing faintly like falling stars. Human recovery teams worked in silence, collecting debris, rescuing survivors, and repairing their own ships. Every soldier, every engineer, every pilot knew this calm was only temporary. The Empire would come back, stronger, angrier, and prepared. Everyone could feel it, but this time humanity was ready to meet them with open eyes and steady hands. There was no fear anymore, only preparation. The solar system had changed. On Earth, construction centers worked around the clock. From orbit, the planet looked alive with light. Shipyards on Mars expanded 3 times their original size. The moon's surface glittered with metallic structures, hangars, and command posts. The once quiet colonies now moved like a single organism. Every part focused on one goal: defense. In every city, people volunteered. Scientists, miners, farmers, it didn't matter who they were. Everyone wanted to help. Some repaired damaged drones, others built supplies, and millions trained for emergencies.
Humanity wasn't building an army.
It was building unity. Yet beneath the rush of activity there was something else, something unspoken. It was that same calm smile people had shown when the first attack came. It appeared again on faces everywhere. From old workers welding ship frames under the red skies of Mars, to young students studying navigation charts, everyone wore it. That quiet, fearless smile. The Empire's spies noticed it. Hidden among trade routes and neutral stations, they sent back reports. "The humans are strange," one transmission read. "They don't seem afraid. They laugh, they sing, they build. They act like they've already won." Those messages reached the Emperor himself. He refused to believe them. "No one smiles before war," he said. "They are pretending. When they see our full fleet, their courage will collapse." But deep down, some of his advisors weren't so sure. Far from the Emperor's palace, out in the dark of space, humanity's greatest secret project was nearing completion. Project Aegis. It wasn't a single weapon or one ship. It was an entire defense system, hidden across the solar system like pieces of an invisible web. The project linked every planet, moon, and station into one vast shield, powered not just by technology, but by the combined will of every human colony. The engineers who designed it said something remarkable. "It's not built to destroy. It's built so we can survive whatever comes." Meanwhile, on the flagship Invictus, preparations were reaching their final stage. The command deck was alive with activity. Officers running diagnostics, drones calibrating weapon arrays, pilots preparing squadrons. Outside the massive windows, the endless black of space stretched out, dotted with stars. The ship had become a symbol now. People from across the colonies sent messages to it, calling it the heart of humanity. Children sent drawings of the ship surrounded by stars. Families wrote messages of hope. Soldiers from distant stations transmitted recordings of their oaths, promising they would hold the line no matter what. The crew of the Invictus never forgot those voices. They kept a single screen on the bridge running. A live feed of Earth's sky, blue and calm, the reason they fought. In the following weeks, the Empire began to move again. Their fleets gathered at the border of their territory. Hundreds of massive warships escorted by carriers, cruisers, and destroyers. This was no demonstration this time. It was an invasion force. Their plan was simple: erase the Terran Armada completely. When the Terran scouts detected their movement, there was no panic. The message reached Earth, and the response came instantly. Hold your positions. Activate Aegis. Across the solar system, thousands of energy nodes lit up like stars being born. Shields unfolded around the inner planets, invisible to the naked eye but strong enough to withstand a sun's flare. Satellites aligned, relays connected, and power grids pulsed with life. Humanity was surrounded not by fear, but by its own creation, a wall of light and purpose. Then, just as everyone expected, the Empire's second attack began. It started with the distortion of space near Neptune's orbit. Hundreds of ships emerging from hyperspace, their dark hulls glowing like storm clouds. The Empire had come in full force. Entire fleets appeared in waves, blocking out the distant stars. Their weapons powered up, targeting everything that moved. But again, the humans didn't run. In every command center, screens flashed red warnings. People took their positions calmly. On Mars, defense grids powered up. On Earth, orbital platforms prepared their cannons. On the Moon, the command center issued one final transmission to all ships. Remember who we are, no speeches. No dramatic orders. Just that simple message. And then came the smile again. Even in the deepest parts of space, even when the Empire's fleet filled the radar with thousands of hostile signals, human crews smiled. Not because they underestimated the enemy, but because they knew they were fighting for something real. Every laugh, every glance, every calm breath reminded them that fear was useless now. On board the Invictus, the captain gave quiet orders. All ships hold formation. Wait for the first strike, the Empire fired first. Blinding beams of energy shot across the void, slamming into the Terran shields. The shock waves rippled, shaking entire ships. For a moment, silence followed. Then the shields held. The light dimmed, but the barrier remained strong. From inside the command center, a soft murmur spread. Relief, pride, hope. Return fire, came the next order. What happened next became legend across the stars. The humans didn't unleash chaos, they responded with grace. Their counterattack was measured, timed, and devastatingly precise. Dozens of Terran dreadnoughts aligned their weapons and fired in perfect sync. Beams of pure light tore through the Empire's formation. Entire cruisers vanished in explosions that looked like falling suns. The Empire's commanders were stunned. They had expected desperation, not discipline. They had expected panic, not perfection. For the first time in centuries, their soldiers hesitated. One of their ships sent a desperate transmission back to the fleet's core command. They aren't fighting like prey. They're fighting like equals. The word spread quickly, echoing through the Empire's channels. The officers tried to restore order, shouting over the comms. But the humans didn't give them time. Small fighter groups broke through the chaos, targeting the Empire's control nodes and jamming systems. Others launched drones that created false readings, making the enemy fire on their own ships. It was a battle of intelligence, not rage, and humanity was winning. Back on Earth, billions watched the transmissions. Some cried, some prayed, others just stared in awe as their species stood against the impossible and didn't break. The smile became something more, a symbol. It spread across colonies, through the networks, into homes and hearts. It wasn't just a gesture anymore. It was a message to the universe: we will not bow hours past. The Empire's fleet kept firing, but every shot grew weaker. Their shields flickered. Their formations broke. One by one, their ships began to fall back. The humans didn't chase them. They held the line exactly as ordered. When the Empire finally retreated, space went silent again. The battlefield was filled with drifting fragments, sparks, and the faint hum of damaged systems. But even as victory settled in, the humans didn't cheer. They knew this wasn't over. In the command deck of the Invictus, the captain looked at the stars and said quietly, "They'll come again." "They always do." The officer beside him nodded. "Then we'll be waiting." Below them, Earth continued to spin, blue, bright, and alive. People went back to work, children went back to school, and the world carried on just as it always had. That was humanity's secret. No matter how vast the enemy, no matter how powerful the threat, life always went on. That continuity, that simple refusal to stop, was what truly frightened the Empire. Because you can fight soldiers. You can destroy fleets. But how do you fight a species that keeps smiling even when the universe turns against them? The Empire's leaders gathered in silence after the defeat. They analyzed every detail, every move, every human strategy. Nothing made sense to them. Their calculations said humans should have lost. Their logic said they should have broken. But logic had never been humanity's way. "Why do they smile?" one of the Emperor's generals asked. The Emperor didn't answer. He only stared at the holographic image of Earth, that small, shining planet surrounded by blue light. And for the first time in his life, he felt something he had never known before: doubt. Back in the solar system, the Terran Armada slowly returned to their stations. The Invictus hovered quietly above the moon, its hull scarred but still strong. Crews worked day and night to repair the damage. On board, someone had painted a small phrase near the main deck entrance. It read, "Smile before the storm." It confuses the enemy. No one knew who wrote it. But it stayed there untouched. Even years later, because that was humanity, calm before chaos, laughter in danger, hope in the darkest night. And as the stars watched from a distance, the galaxy began to whisper again. Maybe the humans weren't the weakest after all. Maybe the ones who smiled in the face of death were the ones destined to survive. And somewhere, far beyond human reach, the Empire began to rebuild. But this time, even they couldn't shake the image burned into their memory. 1,000 human faces smiling back at the storm. The second battle was not just a fight. It was the moment the galaxy changed forever. When the Empire launched its third wave, they came with everything they had. Their defeat at Neptune had humiliated them, and humiliation was something the Empire had never known. This time they didn't send scouts or small fleets. They sent an armada large enough to darken the stars, over 10,000 ships, each one the size of a city. The galaxy watched in silence. Some feared humanity's end had finally come. Others whispered that if Earth fell, hope would die with it. The Empire wanted to make an example, to show every living being what happens when someone dares to stand against them. But deep inside the solar system, humanity stood ready. By now, the Terran Armada had grown stronger. The first battles had united every human world under one command. Shipyards across Mars and Titan worked day and night, building new dreadnoughts, cruisers, and carriers. Fleets from the colonies beyond Pluto returned home to defend their origin. Even the smallest stations sent supplies and volunteers. Humanity had become one family, a single heartbeat echoing through space. When the Empire's massive armada entered the system, their scanners filled with thousands of signals. But what they didn't know was that most of what they saw wasn't real. For weeks, human engineers had filled the outer system with decoy drones and false energy readings. To the Empire, it looked like Earth's forces were scattered, disorganized, easy to crush. So they divided their armada into 3 groups, one heading toward Mars, another toward the Moon, and the third straight for Earth itself. That was their second mistake. The humans were not scattered. They were waiting. The real Terran Armada was hidden near Titan's orbit, cloaked under the energy veil of Project Aegis. Thousands of ships floated in perfect silence, invisible to scanners. Their engines were cold, their weapons unpowered like shadows sleeping among the stars. On the bridge of the Invictus, the crew watched as the Empire drew closer, unaware they were flying into a trap built with patience and intelligence. When the Empire's first wave reached Mars, they began firing before the humans even responded. Gigantic plasma beams cut across the sky, burning through the thin Martian atmosphere. Cities shook, dust rose, but then the attacks hit something unexpected: shields. Massive energy domes flickered to life over the colonies, glowing bright against the red landscape. Every time the enemy fired, the shields absorbed it like sunlight. Mars did not fall. It stood. At the same time, on Earth's moon, human garrisons activated heavy artillery stations. Cannons the size of mountains rotated toward the stars. For hours they had remained cold and dark. Now, with one command, they awoke. Beams of white light ripped through space, striking the approaching enemy ships one after another. In less than 10 minutes, the Empire's second group began to falter. Their ships collided, their formations broke apart. It was chaos, and that's when the real battle began. From behind Saturn, the hidden Terran Armada ignited its engines all at once. The void lit up with trails of blue fire as thousands of human ships burst forward, moving faster than the Empire's sensors could react. They came from the dark side of the planet, flanking the Empire's main force from both sides. The Invictus led the charge, its dark hull cut through the stars like a blade. Behind it, dreadnoughts and destroyers followed, forming a perfect wall of power. The Empire's commanders barely had time to issue new orders before the first Terran volley struck. It was not a single shot, but a rain of energy. Massive shockwaves tore through the Empire's front lines. Entire cruisers vanished in explosions that turned night into day. The Empire fought back fiercely. Their ships fired everything: torpedoes, energy lances, gravity bombs. But the humans had already learned their tactics. Each time the enemy targeted one area, the Terran formation shifted like flowing water. Every hit missed by just enough. Every attack was answered with precision. For the first time in history, the Empire was not in control. In the Empire's command ship, their admiral shouted over the alarms. "Regroup! Counterattack!" he yelled. But the damage was done. Half his communication systems were jammed. The humans had released a wave of electromagnetic drones that scrambled every Imperial frequency. Ships that once moved like one mind were now blind and isolated. Meanwhile, the humans kept advancing. Inside their ships, crews worked with quiet determination. There was no cheering, no shouting, and just calm voices. Every pilot focused, every engineer steady. They all knew what was at stake. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. As the Empire's fleet tried to retreat, the humans activated the next phase of Project Aegis, the gravity wells. Invisible fields spread across space, trapping enemy ships in distorted gravity zones. Any vessel that tried to escape hyperspace was pulled back violently. For the first time, the Empire's ships couldn't run. In less than 2 hours, the once invincible fleet began to crumble. The galaxy's largest warships burned silently in the dark. Some tried to surrender, ejecting escape pods. The humans did not fire on them. Every pod was left untouched. That mercy, that restraint, became the moment that defined humanity in the eyes of the universe. When the battle ended, the Empire's flagship drifted helplessly, its power gone, its weapons offline. The humans surrounded it but did not destroy it. Instead, the Invictus transmitted a message on an open frequency. You came to teach us fear, but all you've taught us is how strong we can be when we stand together. Leave now. Take your survivors. Go home. The Empire's surviving officers hesitated. No one had ever spoken to them like that. Calm, steady, without hatred. Slowly, the remaining enemy ships turned away. One by one, they disappeared into hyperspace, retreating from the solar system. The humans didn't chase. They didn't celebrate. They simply watched the stars grow quiet again. The war was far from over, but that day marked something no one had ever imagined. The Empire's first defeat. The galaxy trembled at the news. Civilizations that had been silent for centuries began to speak. Entire worlds under Imperial control started sending secret messages to Earth, not for help but for guidance. They wanted to know how humans had done it, how a single young species had stood against the greatest power in the galaxy and won. On those worlds, children drew pictures of the blue planet that defied an empire. People whispered stories of the humans, the ones who smiled when the universe tried to break them. The Empire's leaders were in shock. Reports of the loss filled their halls. Some demanded vengeance, others demanded answers. The Emperor sat in silence, staring at the hologram of the destroyed fleet. For the first time, fear, not from outside but inside, was spread among them. They realized they were no longer invincible. Meanwhile, back in the solar system, life went on. Humanity didn't build monuments or parade through the streets. They repaired what was broken, buried their fallen, and strengthened their defenses. They understood the truth. The Empire would return, but they would be ready again. In the following weeks, the galaxy began calling this moment the Battle of Titan's Shadow. Historians would later say it wasn't just a military victory. It was a message. It told every species that even the strongest empire could fall, and that courage could come from the smallest world. On board the Invictus, the crew stood quietly, looking out at the field of stars. The battle was over, but the silence that followed felt heavier than before. The captain turned to the crew and spoke softly. We didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we refused to give up. Those words spread through every channel, every colony, every outpost. They became a saying among humans, painted on walls, carved into ships, whispered by workers in the dark, refused to give up. That was the heart of humanity. Even as the Empire licked its wounds and planned its revenge, people on Earth slept peacefully under the same stars, knowing they had done something impossible. They had defended their home, not with arrogance or anger, but with courage and unity. And in the quiet that followed, the universe learned something new. The humans didn't just fight wars. They changed how others saw them. They reminded the galaxy that even in the face of destruction, humanity smiled and stood tall. After the Empire's defeat near Titan, the galaxy was never the same again. News spread faster than light. Across thousands of star systems, people whispered the same thing. The humans won. At first, many didn't believe it. The Zarathian Empire had ruled the galaxy for centuries. Their armies had crushed entire civilizations. Their name alone made worlds surrender before a single shot was fired. To think that a small species from a blue planet at the edge of space had beaten them, it sounded impossible. But then the proof came. Broadcasts of the destroyed Imperial fleet, the broken command ships drifting in silence, and the faint human message that echoed across every open frequency. We do not seek conquest. We seek peace. Leave our home here and you will find us kind. Threaten it, and you will find us ready. Those words became legendary. The galaxy had lived in fear for so long that no one remembered what courage looked like. And now courage had a name, humanity. On planets once ruled by the Empire, things began to change. Slaves whispered in secret chambers. Soldiers hesitated to obey cruel orders, and citizens started painting the image of a blue planet on their walls, a sign of hope. The Empire, meanwhile, was in chaos. Their loss had destroyed their illusion of control. Inside their capital, massive halls filled with arguments and anger. Generals blamed admirals, admirals blamed engineers, and politicians blamed each other. The emperor, usually cold and silent, was furious but also afraid. The idea that anyone could defeat them was something his mind couldn't accept. But no matter how many excuses they made, the truth stayed the same. They had been beaten, and not just beaten, outsmarted. Their defeat at Titan wasn't a small loss. It broke the very image of their invincibility. Every world that once bowed to them now began questioning their strength. The emperor ordered the creation of a new war council. He wanted to plan an even greater attack on humanity, something so massive that it would erase the shame of defeat. But even as he spoke of war, the fear in his voice was clear, because deep down, he knew the humans were different. The Empire had faced rebels, pirates, and other alien powers before, but humanity didn't fight like any of them. They didn't fight for domination. They fought with unity, precision, and something the Empire never understood: heart. While the Empire built bigger weapons, humanity built trust. On Earth, the people didn't celebrate the victory with parades or pride. They rebuilt what was broken, honored the fallen, and helped the wounded return home. Engineers upgraded ships. Scientists studied captured Imperial tech. Farmers on distant colonies worked together to feed soldiers returning from the front. It was not the behavior of conquerors. It was the behavior of survivors. And that difference, more than anything else, frightened the Empire, because how do you defeat a species that doesn't fight for power, but for each other? In the weeks that followed, something extraordinary began to happen. Civilizations that had been silent for ages started sending messages to Earth. Some were weak and desperate. Others were powerful but tired of living in fear. They all said the same thing: "We want to stand with you." At first, Earth didn't know how to respond. Humanity had always been the outsider, the youngest among the stars. But now, the galaxy looked at them with respect. The Terran Council decided not to build an empire, but a coalition, an alliance of free worlds that wanted peace without submission. It began with a handful of planets, then grew. Within months, over 50 civilizations had joined. Together, they formed what came to be known as the Terran Accord. Their symbol was simple: a circle of stars with a blue dot in the center. The blue dot represented Earth, the small planet that reminded everyone that even the smallest light could guide a whole galaxy. But the Empire didn't stay silent for long. From their capital world, the Emperor released a message across the galaxy. His voice was cold and sharp, echoing through every frequency. "Do not mistake mercy for weakness. The humans defied us, and now they will face extinction." The galaxy held its breath. Everyone expected humanity to panic. Instead, Earth's response was calm and clear. The message came from the same ship that had led the battle, the Invictus. The voice that spoke was calm, human, and steady. Extinction is a word spoken by those who have forgotten how to live. We will not disappear. We will endure. That message spread faster than the Empire's threat. People replayed it, shared it, memorized it. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy had found something greater than fear: hope. And that hope became dangerous. Rebellions began breaking out across the Empire. Small at first, then larger. Workers refused to mine resources for war. Soldiers laid down their weapons. Entire planets declared independence, raising the Terran Circle of Stars as their new flag. The Empire tried to crush them, but it was like trying to hold water with open hands. The more they attacked, the more resistance they created. The people had seen what humans had done, and they wanted that same courage. Across the stars, human ships began arriving not as conquerors, but as protectors. They brought food, medicine, and engineers to rebuild cities destroyed by the Empire. Where the Empire had ruled with fear, the humans built trust. It was a quiet revolution, one not fought with lasers or bombs, but with kindness and resolve. Even some of the Empire's officers began to question their loyalty. Stories spread of human commanders who spared defeated enemies, who offered aid instead of punishment. Those stories traveled fast, faster than light, carried by every survivor who had once faced humanity and lived to tell the tale. The phrase, Terran Mercy, began to circulate among the stars. It was both awe and warning. Soon the galaxy's balance of power began to shift. The Empire was losing control, not because their fleets were destroyed, but because their people no longer believed in them. The Emperor ordered another grand invasion of the Sol system, but few of his admirals were willing to go. The fear of facing the Terran Armada again haunted them. Many had seen the look in human eyes, whether calm, fearless, almost gentle even in war. It wasn't rage. It was certainty. They said the humans smiled before the battle. And that smile broke something deep inside the Empire's heart. That was the real reckoning. The galaxy finally realized that the war was no longer about territory or power. It was about belief. And the Empire's belief had died at Titan's shadow. Across hundreds of light years, new alliances formed. Former enemies began working together under human guidance. Species that had never spoken before now shared technology and ideas. The humans became a bridge between them, not the center of power, but the voice of reason. In a council meeting broadcast across the galaxy, the Terran leader said something that would later be recorded in history. We are not here to replace one empire with another. We are here to make sure there are no more empires. Those words made the galaxy roar with approval. Even the Empire's outer colonies began to cheer in secret. For the first time in recorded history, peace felt possible. Of course, it wasn't easy. The Empire still had fleets, weapons, and pride. They attacked smaller worlds, trying to prove they still had control. But every time they struck, the Terran Accord helped rebuild what was destroyed. And with every act of kindness, the Empire lost another ally. It wasn't fast, but it was powerful. Like the tide slowly reshaping the shore, humanity's patience began to change the galaxy. And through it all, humans remained humble. They never claimed to be saviors. They always reminded others, we made our own mistakes once too. We learned the hard way, but we learned. That honesty made others trust them even more. As months passed, the Empire's mighty symbol, the black sun, began to fade from spaceports and cities. People painted over it, replacing it with the circle of stars. The Emperor still sat on his throne, surrounded by his guards. But even he knew his empire was dying, not by force, but by the will of billions who refused to live in fear any longer. The reckoning had arrived not as a storm, but as a sunrise. Some historians later said that the empire was destroyed by human weapons, but those who lived through it knew better. The empire wasn't defeated by missiles or ships. It was defeated by something far greater, the human spirit. Because when the galaxy saw the courage of humanity, they realized something beautiful. If such a small world could stand up to the largest empire and still smile, then maybe they could too. And that idea, that small, simple belief, became the most powerful weapon in the universe. The galaxy had changed. Worlds that once lived in silence now spoke freely. Planets that had hidden in fear for generations were beginning to breathe again. The Empire's shadow was fading piece by piece, replaced by something new. Something the stars had not seen in centuries. Hope. The war was not truly over, but everyone could feel that the end was near. The Terran Accord had grown larger than anyone ever imagined. Dozens of species, and once enemies, once strangers, now stood side by side working together for the same dream. And at the center of it all was humanity. The species that had once been ignored, underestimated, and mocked by the old powers of the galaxy was now the one guiding them toward peace. But peace never comes without a price. Even as the Empire began to collapse, fragments of their once great fleet still roamed the outer systems. They attacked small colonies and trading routes, desperate to remind the galaxy that they still existed. Human patrols went out daily to protect those worlds, not to conquer but to shield. For every world that was saved, the legend of humanity grew stronger. People started calling them the Smiling Warriors. The phrase came from something small but unforgettable, the way humans always smiled before battle. To others, it seemed strange. How could a species smile in such moments? Were they fearless or just foolish? But those who had fought beside humans knew the truth. The smile wasn't arrogance or madness. It was something deeper. It was belief. A belief that no matter how dark things became, light would always return. One cold morning, as the twin suns of a faraway system rose over a newly freed planet, a small group of soldiers stood watching from a cliff. The war had taken everything from them, Yet they stood quietly looking up at the brightening sky. One of them turned to the others and said softly, "You know what's strange? We fought an empire that ruled half the galaxy, and somehow, we're still here." Still smiling, no one answered. They didn't need to. That simple truth was enough. Meanwhile, across the stars, the last remnants of the empire gathered on their homeworld, a dark planet surrounded by dying suns. The Emperor, old and tired, stared at the broken fleets returning one by one. His pride was gone, his armies shattered, and his once loyal admirals silent. For years he had ruled with fear. He believed control was the only way to keep order. But now all that remained was emptiness. The people no longer listened. The soldiers no longer obeyed. And the galaxy no longer bowed. It wasn't the Terran guns that had defeated him. It was the Terran idea. When news came that even his outer colonies had joined the Accord, he stood from his throne and looked out the window at his empire. What was left of it? The stars that once felt like his own now felt distant, cold, and strange. That night the Emperor gave his final command. Not to fight, but to surrender. The message reached Earth within days. When it arrived, the people didn't celebrate wildly. There were no fireworks or shouting crowds. Instead, the world went quiet. Streets were filled with people standing together, listening to the broadcast in silence. The voice from the Imperial message was calm. "The war is over. The Empire yields. May your peace be greater than our pride." For a long moment, no one spoke, and then softly, somewhere in the crowd, someone began to smile. Not a smile of victory, but of relief. Of peace finally found. In space, the Terran Armada began its long journey home. Ships that had spent years in the cold black silence were now returning, their engines glowing faintly like lanterns in the night. When they entered Earth's orbit, the planet below looked peaceful, blue, bright, and alive. The sight of it brought tears to many eyes. Some of the crew hadn't seen home in years. Others had never seen it at all. They had been born in the stars, children of war. As they looked down, they saw light stretching across continents, cities glowing in harmony, not war. For the first time, it felt like everything had been worth it. Inside the Invictus, the ship that had led the first battles and carried the last peace message, the crew stood on the viewing deck. They watched Earth spin slowly below them. No one spoke for a while. The silence was peaceful, the kind of silence that comes after a storm has passed. Finally, one of the officers whispered, "We really did it." The captain nodded.
"No," he said softly.
"We didn't. Humanity did. The galaxy did. We just helped it remember how to hope again." That line would later be written in every history book. When the Terran Council finally gathered, it wasn't to build more weapons, but to dismantle them. One by one, the great warships were turned into peace vessels, their cannons replaced with communication arrays and cargo bays filled with supplies. The Invictus itself was turned into a symbol, a floating museum orbiting Earth, where children from every world could come and learn about what had happened, not to glorify the war, but to understand why it must never happen again. The galaxy's first truly free alliance had been born, and its foundation wasn't power, but compassion. Everywhere, signs of the new age began to appear. Planets that had once been burned by war were now filled with laughter. Cities rebuilt under the Accord's help stood as beacons of unity. The humans didn't rule, they guided. They didn't command, they listened, and the galaxy listened too. Even old enemies began to speak to one another again. Trade routes reopened. Science flourished. For the first time in centuries, the stars felt alive again. But among all these great changes, one story kept being told. The story of how it all began. How the Empire had threatened to erase humanity. And how instead of fear, the humans had smiled. It became the story parents told their children at night. It became the lesson taught in schools on 100 different worlds. That sometimes courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it simply smiles. Years later, a celebration was held to mark the 10th anniversary of peace. Leaders from every world gathered in orbit around Earth. There were no armies, no weapons, just people. Humans, aliens, children, elders, all standing together under the same stars. As the ceremony began, the captain of the Invictus stepped forward to speak. His voice was calm, his expression kind. Once, he said, the galaxy was ruled by fear, But fear dies the moment someone chooses to smile in its face. That's what humanity did. And now, it's what we all do. Together. The crowd stood in silence, then slowly began to clap. It was not thunderous or loud. It was soft, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the galaxy itself. When the captain looked out across the crowd, he didn't see species or ranks. He saw people, united, alive, free. And that was when it truly sank in. The war hadn't just saved humanity. It had saved everyone. After the ceremony, as the stars glittered above, a young child from a distant colony walked up to the captain and asked a simple question. Why did humans smile when they were afraid? The captain knelt down and replied gently, because we learned that fear only wins when you let it. And sometimes the best way to fight darkness is to smile back at it. The child smiled too. That moment, small and quiet, captured the entire spirit of what humanity had become. A reminder that courage isn't about power. It's about heart. As the galaxy entered its new era, monuments weren't built from stone or metal, but from understanding. Every planet created a hall of smiles, a place where people could leave drawings, letters or stories about kindness, bravery, or hope. And no matter where you went, from the frozen moons of Titan to the golden skies of Epsilon Prime, you'd find the same words written on the walls. We smiled, and the galaxy smiled back. That was humanity's true legacy. Not the weapons, not the ships, but the spirit that refused to give up. Even centuries later, when people spoke of the Great War, they didn't talk about destruction. They talked about what came after, about the light that followed the darkness, because that's what humans did best. They found light even in the darkest places, and in the end, that smile, though simple, quiet, unbroken, didn't just save a planet. It saved the galaxy.